In today's video, let's get technical. Hello everyone, and welcome back to this series of videos for Theater 5113, producing the high school play. Now, as usual, we're going to be talking a little bit about what's in the text. I'll be giving my thoughts on it. I'll have further thoughts at the end, but as per usual, we're going to be looking at our text, the director's vision, and hey kids, let's put on a show. So if you're ready, curtain up, let's get started. The first part of our reading dives into the technical aspects of music and spectacle. So we'll start with music. This means all of the sound in the play, not just instruments and singing. There's sound effects, there's the sound of words, there's music between scenes. It can be just as important in a straight play as it is in a musical. When you're looking at your performers' voices, your vision needs to include how your performers are going to sound. For example, you need to cast for their vocal qualities, vocal diversity. You don't want all of your actors to sound exactly the same. Find voices that fit the character and that will work well with other voices on stage. Use your vocal qualities in order to control focus. Distinctive voices are going to attract more attention. For sound effects, these are everyday sounds that can create a scene or abstract sounds that can stimulate an audience's emotions. There are mechanical sound effects, and these are things that can be live or recorded. They are things that are called for in the scene and usually in the script, like a doorbell ringing or a phone ringing. Then you have your environmental sound effects, and those add texture to the environment, things like wind blowing, birds chirping. And then you have things that will stimulate emotional resonance, like background music or the sounds of a cathedral in the distance. Next, you have your mood-enhancing effects, and those are going to touch on a little bit higher level of communication. A lot of times these are sounds that you are using to represent something else, such as a character's state of mind, things that are going to be used for symbolism or metaphor within the show. If you are using sound effects within a show, make sure that you go through troubleshooting ahead of time. I have worked on productions where it has been really hard to set the volume level of just one sound effect within a scene. Sometimes it's too loud, sometimes it's too quiet. And then when you get your audience in there, that's going to change the whole dynamic of it as well. So make sure that you are practicing these ahead of time. However, using sound in your show can really add to what you're doing as long as you test it well beforehand. Looking at instrumental accompaniment or songs within your show. This has been used since all the way back in the ancient Greeks. Music can enhance the mood and the environment of a show. If the dialogue is not enough to express the emotion of what's going on, then you can add music underneath it in order to really get it across. Usually the music that is used not as part of a scene is going to be your pre-show, your entr'acte, and your chaser music. Your pre-show sets the scene for what the audience is about to see. The entr'acte plays between acts, entr'acte, and it starts with the mood of the last act and shifts into the mood of the next act in order to help prepare your audience for what's to come. And your chaser music plays as your audience is leaving. It can reflect the mood of your show, or if you ended on kind of a downer, it can maybe uplift your audience as they are leaving. Then for your music within the show, you have your integral and your incidental music. Your integral music is written into the story. The dialogue stops so that the music can go. Incidental music is played in the background behind the dialogue. It doesn't stop the dialogue in order to be heard. Moving on to chapter 9, where we talk about spectacle. That is everything that your eye is going to take in. Your scenery, your lighting, costumes, props, makeup, hair. This is something that was, again, going all the way back to the ancient Greeks. They added spectacle in order to make their shows look more interesting. Remember, the audiences go to see a show, not just hear a show. So you're wanting to show rather than tell sometimes. It establishes the environment of the play. It can enrich your characterization. It creates the mood and style of the show. It enhances the meaning of the play. It engages the audience, and it contributes to the audience's aesthetic pleasure of the show. One of the things that will affect the type of spectacle that you're able to add to the show is going to be the architecture of your theater. You have, first of all, your proscenium arch, which is the one that most people are going to be familiar with, in that it confines the acting space within a picture frame type setting. Next, you have your thrust stage, which is like your proscenium, but it has a part of the stage that is out into the audience. So this creates an interesting space that allows the audience to be closer to the action. And then you have your arena staging, or as some people will refer to it, theater in the round. And this is something that requires a lot of creativity as far as staging the actual show. But it does create a lot of realism and three-dimensionalism in your actual blocking. So it can be really interesting to look at if you can figure out how to get it to work. The next thing that will determine spectacle is going to be the style of your production, the way of presenting your vision. This is all going to be affected by the playwright's time, location, their culture, and you need to respond to their script in a way that will best bring that style to life. A lot of times, the style is going to be either representational, so it's going to be more realistic, or it's going to be presentational, which is more non-realistic. So looking at the scale of realism to non-realism, we start first of all with realism, and this is a selective representation of the actual world. You're not exaggerating, you are trying to reproduce lifelike behaviors. Next, you have your modified or selected realism. This is more suggested. You'll have parts of things, and it calls for the audience to fill in what the missing pieces are. Next, you have expressionism, and this is how the world is seen through the lens of one character. It's going to focus on portions, and it's going to exaggerate certain things in order to fit the theme of the play and the emotions of that character. Next is going to be theatricalism, and this is where you are calling attention to the conventions of the theater. So you will have lighting rigs that are visible. You will have characters changing costume in view of the audience. You'll have your props laying around. So they are seeing that this is a show. And then finally, you have your symbolic type of theater. This is where you are making a statement based off of the cosmic, social, or personal influences of the playwright. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the ground plan of your design. And design is not one of my strong areas, so I'm always wanting to learn a little bit more about it so I can get a little bit better at it. Now, your ground plan is going to be a 2D scale drawing of the stage as viewed from up above the set or scenery of the play. Now, the analysis of your script is going to determine your ground plan. It needs to fit the context and the vision of your show and still fit within the budget of your show and the limitations of the stage. When you are developing a ground plan, first of all, be aware of balance. You need to know where your center line is. That's an imaginary line that runs from upstage center to downstage center. Almost all of your designs are going to have some sort of symmetry, keeping things balanced on both sides of the center line. Imbalance is where you tend to have a whole bunch of stuff on one side of the stage, but not so much on the other. Imbalance is rarely used and only in really specific circumstances. In fact, I don't know if I have ever really seen someone intentionally use imbalance in a set design. I'm sure it's out there, but it's not something that you're typically going to see used. Your design needs to have architectural logic within your theatrical needs. Keep your entrances and your exits consistent. If you have a character that leaves upstage right in order to go to a kitchen, then that is upstage right kitchen for the whole rest of the show. Your ground plan needs to have your entrances and exits. It needs to show whether or not you are raking the stage, and that is where you elevate the upstage area, making your set a big ramp. A lot of times this can help with some sightline problems and making things a lot more visible to an audience. Show where your levels, platforms, and stairs are going to be. They can add a lot of visual interest, but keep in mind that constructing these can sometimes take more out of your budget. Your furniture placement. What's essential? What's going to suggest the environment? Are you placing it in a logical place? Is it grouped into interesting acting areas? Making a ground plan is a continuous process of trial and error, and it takes a lot of time to really get right. Some people have more of a gift of it than others. I do not really have a gift for it, but it's something that I don't mind learning over and over. Chapter 6 of Hey Kids, Let's Put on a Show talks about coordinating your technical elements. The first thing that I noticed from this chapter was some great advice, and that is ask for help. You cannot do all the technical work yourself. And the more people you get to work on this show, the more people will be willing to come and see it, and the more publicity you're going to get out of it from people helping out. So ask for help, because people don't know that you need the help until you ask for it. Looking at sound, that tends to be the most important thing in working with children and educational theater, because this is where you want to spend your money. Parents want to hear their kids on stage speaking and singing. So check for rental areas if you don't have access to a sound system there at your actual facility, and maybe get a technician on hand to help you set everything up. In lighting, you want to keep things as simple as you possibly can. So you're usually going to include things like a blackout, a scene change ghost light, a day wash, and a night wash, and then any specials that you might need to add. Spotlights are useful but not necessary. If you have access to spotlights and you have people who are willing to run them, then these are great, especially for musicals. Most theaters are also going to have a cyclorama hanging on the back of the stage, and a lot of times this helps create more of a mood by projecting colors onto it. Sound and lighting in your show will also give some of your older students a chance to help out, because you can teach them what the cues are, how to run everything. And if they are not the type of students that want to be on stage, maybe they didn't get cast this time around, but they still want to help, this is a way that they can definitely help, is running lights and sound under your supervision. Building a set is a fantastic opportunity to get volunteers involved, and especially parents. They can come in and build the sets with their kids. And you need to have a clear plan to strike and store the set pieces after the final performance. There are some things that you can keep in storage that you can use over and over on a set by just repainting them, and these are things like muslin flats, freestanding doors, stair units, platforms, and acting blocks or cubes. If you have a place to store these, you can repaint them. You can use them over and over in a variety of different set designs. As far as costumes and makeup go, if something really elaborate is needed costume-wise, then check for rentals. That's going to be your easiest option, and sometimes they will give you some sort of a student deal or some sort of a discount as long as you put the name of their company in your program. You also have the option of contacting other schools in the area who might have done the same or similar show before. For the most part, a lot of the things that you do in children's and educational theater will be able to be costumed by the kids just going to their closets and seeing what they have. For makeup, most girls can just wear regular street makeup for a show, and boys can go just as is, but with a little bit of eyeliner in order to help you see their eyes a little bit better. More elaborate makeup is going to require parents or volunteers to come in. A lot of times we will have college students come and design and implement the makeup for class credit, and a lot of times some of your more experienced students will really enjoy learning how to design and apply the makeup themselves. For props, most scripts are going to have a prop list in the back, but I've found that there are usually a few things that they miss, so you're going to need to keep a running list as you are going through blocking the show. Ask your actors to keep track of how many props they need themselves. Also, make sure that you see what you can borrow or make before you buy anything. Overall, shows do not have to depend on technical things and bigger spectacles. You have an opportunity here to give the performers a chance to communicate with their bodies and voices, and let that be the spectacle rather than lights, sound, and so on. Finally, just a few thoughts that I have on spectacle music and technical things. In theater, a lot of times you have the option of using live musicians, or you can use pre-recorded music. Recorded is useful because it's going to be the exact same way every single time. Although, if you have live musicians, if you need to make cuts and edits in a song, then it's kind of easier to do that with your live musician. Although if you use an MTI show, they do have an app that allows you to do a little bit of editing on the pre-recorded music, but that's not going to be true for every single show that you do. Also, live music gives your actors a little bit more of a chance to set tempo, use more expression and things like that, whereas with a pre-recorded one, you are stuck to the same metronomic beat every single time. If you have a live orchestra, then you do have to block in more time for your music director to actually work with the musicians and work them into the rehearsal process. So that's extra time and rehearsal that you need to account for. You have to ask yourself if that's going to balance out with the benefits of having live music. As far as my experience with different types of theater settings, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be in a proscenium area. Although throughout my college career, there were a few times where I did arena theater, and that is really a challenge, I have to say. You have to find creative ways to make sure that the audience is seeing all the action from all sides. And it kind of requires this internal 3D modeler that you have to work with in order to make sure that everything's going to work. So if you are willing to tackle that challenge, it can be so interactive and fun and beautiful. But just know that it's going to be a challenge to block. As far as spectacle goes, I always tend to be more of a minimalist on everything, and that's usually because in working in children's and educational theater, I don't get a budget. And so I have to make things as representational and as simple as possible. So you have to find ways to create focus where it's needed. Having specific props and specific costuming can definitely go a long way if you don't have the money for set pieces. Just having something interesting on stage to look at and letting your kids use their bodies and their voices, it really does go a long way. When I am able to design a set, it's, like I said, not my strong suit, so I will usually find some designers nearby that I can consult with to see what it is that I'm missing. I'll especially need help if I am designing a problem area. I directed a show once where I had to come up with a design, and I had the main area of the stage, but then there was a secondary area that also needed to be part of the set where a few other scenes would happen, and trying to find a way to fit that in a very small black box theater really was a challenge, and I really had to consult with a couple of different designers on how to make that work. And although it wasn't 100% my original vision, I learned to adapt to that and adjust the blocking so that we could get that done. And as far as what Hey Kids, Let's Put on a Show talks about coordinating all your technical elements, I definitely agree. Keep your lighting as simple as possible. I personally would be nervous to program a light board on my own without someone checking over my shoulder. Again, not hugely my area of expertise, but I could force my way through it if I needed to. When you are looking at your props and you are making a list of everything, be sure that you are aware whether or not you are doing a prop heavy show. I did a show recently that was extremely prop heavy. As a director, you need to be aware of doing a prop heavy show and the work that will go into that. And finally, I liked what the book said about not having to rely 100% on spectacle. I did a show in college where we really did not have a budget. We had one standard costume that everybody wore, and then everything else was moving acting blocks around for our set and adding different props and little costume pieces on over our standard costume. And we got so much out of that because it still made it visually interesting. It was just everything else that we were doing with our bodies. So you don't have to spend a ton of money on spectacle to make something visually interesting. So that wraps up our discussion on music, spectacle, and design. I hope you found this interesting and helpful, and I can't wait to see you for the rest of this series. I will see you next time, and scene.